So that's what I was waiting for the recording. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jorik, and I am from the organization of Panterij. Panterij has been organizing postgraduate courses for about 20 years, especially for osteopaths, or only for osteopaths. And sometimes we do a little step aside, and that's one of the reasons why when we get very excited when Larry and Carol contacted us for organizing something with Feldenkrais, and something is becoming a little bigger with the coming webinars coming in, a course of Feldenkrais, and hopefully we can start a full program next year. Together with Larry and Carol and Renee, we have been doing a lot of work before we start this webinar, and we are happy to welcome you all. If you have any other people who are interested, they can always see this webinar later, contact us later for practical questions. And for now, thank you for being here. My name is Jorik again, and I give the word to Larry Goldfarb, who is the man of Feldenkrais, together with Carol van Eersel.
Hi, y'all.
And Larry.
Hi, everybody. Caro is here. I don't know where she is on your screen. Caro, you want to wave so people can see you? There you go. Caro and I have been co-directing Feldenkrais teacher training programs in the Netherlands for 30 years. Oh, my God. Is that true? That's about right, yeah? No? 20 years. 23 years, 20, something like that, 20-some years. Yeah. Anyways, if it was a kid, it would be graduated from college, you know? Anyway, and we are organizing with Panterij another training in the Netherlands starting next year. And this is the first official event for that program. It's very nice to see you all here. Some of you I know, some of you I've known for a very long time. Nicolene is here. She's a graduate of one of our previous Amsterdam training programs and a member of the Vereniging in the Netherlands for Feldenkrais teachers. And I see some of my colleagues from France and Sicily. And hi, Sylvia. I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. All right. And from the United States as well. So let's jump in. Today's workshop webinar is called Realizing Movement Potential. And let me tell you a little bit about why I chose that as a title. Talk some about Moshe's methodology, Moshe Feldenkrais's methodology, and then give you an experience of how this works, its application. The Feldenkrais method, it's a first-person approach. It is or let's say experience-first approach. It's experiential learning, and so you'll have a chance to do that today. So you will need someplace to lie down and a blanket or a pad to lie on. I recommend the floor and not a bed. Yeah, you probably want to do this on the floor. Okay. So many approaches start by asking the question, was ist kaputt? What's broken? What's wrong? What doesn't work? Feldenkrais, in the development of his method and in his approach, started somewhere else. The workshop is about realizing our movement potential, like how do we develop our birthright to be able to move easily, effectively, and enjoyably. That presupposes an understanding of what that potential is. And that's really different from asking what's broken. It's asking the question, how do we move when we move as well as we can? What does that mean? And the movement's not of particular parts of ourselves, of our physical structure, but of how the whole framework moves together. Feldenkrais, in his formation, was an engineer and a martial artist, and he was one of the founders of the Judo Club of France in the 30s, in the 1930s, and he was one of the, I think, one of the first white men to get a second degree black belt in judo. And he had a unique perspective. So judo, perhaps I should say, is a martial arts that was developed by a man named Jigoro Kano in the late 1800s. And Kano didn't fit the type for he was a small man. He wasn't a big athletic or muscular guy, and he reworked the martial arts of the time, jiu-jitsu, and Feldenkrais in studying what Kano had come up with. I mean, so Kano changed the actual practice, what the you could say the moves of based on what was in jiu-jitsu, and he changed the way that people learn this art. And perhaps the most important thing to say in judo, it doesn't matter how big you are or how strong you are. Judo is based on using the structure of your body and the laws of physics to move in the easiest way. And there's more to it than that. But I think what Moshe decoded from his experience and his kind of framework as an engineer, as somebody who understood mechanical structures, is he got from his study of judo an understanding of how human anatomy is designed to move effectively and efficiently. So I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he extracted, from a practical understanding that was developed over many iterations, over hundreds of years of martial arts practice, this idea, which is kind of a radical notion, that human beings are meant to move, that's in our structure. So as I said in the description of the workshop, the method is based on this understanding. Moshe didn't invent it. He abstracted it. And Kano's mission in his life was to, I think what he would have said, was to bring body and spirit together. I think we would say mind and body together. And Feldenkrais kind of developed a sort of martial art for everyday life, like how we could apply this understanding and these physical principles to what we do in everyday life. And it is behind or within everything that we do as Feldenkrais teachers, an understanding of how people move when we move as well as we can. And there's another part to that, excuse me. Which is that we are designed to learn that our nervous system is we have the long before the current idea of neuroplasticity became popular. Feldenkrais had this notion that how we move affects our nervous system and how we perceive ourselves. And he talked about the way our behavior affected our biology, the structure of our brain. What's interesting about that is that in the neuroplasticity in general is this idea that the nervous system changes based on our behavior. Not all parts of the nervous system are changeable forever. So, like, to learn language, it seems, from what we know now, that there's a window that you have to learn language somewhere between, I think, the ages of 4 and 8 years old. Otherwise, your mental capacities just don't develop. And we know that from a lot of different, some unfortunate historical events, but we have a lot of evidence for that to be true. On the other hand, the part of the brain that's responsible for how we move, that's amenable to learning throughout our lifetime. Which makes sense, right? Because our bodies are going to change as we develop and age. So we constantly need to be able to update the way that we move to adjust to these changes. Some of them built in and innate, and some of them having to do with what happens in our lives. So we have this capacity for learning to move throughout our lifetime. So Feldenkrais harnesses both of these aspects. It is a neurophysical approach. It takes the physical structure of our body and this notion that we are built to move in the easiest possible ways, which requires an understanding of these kind of global patterns of action, like how the structure, how the way that our arms are connected to our chest and our spine, how our the arrangement of the muscles, like where the biggest muscles are in the body in relationship to the overall blueprint of the skeleton. The structure of the spine at the very top of the neck and of the way the feet and the legs meet and how those things relate to each other. Feldenkrais's understanding has to do with these global patterns that are built into our structure. And in a way, you could say on the biomechanical level, right? I mean, we're machines. We're not just machines, but we're machines designed for movement. And I mean, you could think of the skeleton perhaps not as a can opener, but more as a Swiss Army knife. That within the structure, there are many different ways that we can move depending on what we want to accomplish or do. Yeah, so excuse me. Feldenkrais is an educational approach where taking this understanding of optimal human movement and an understanding of how it is that we learn to move, that we can attain this potential. And I think we have to ask, well, what is it that keeps us from naturally attaining it? And that has to do with understanding how learning happens, right? As we learn something, that the sign of successful learning is that it becomes automated, which means that the things that we have learned are the things that interfere with learning anything new. So that what interferes with the potential is actually the things that we have already learned. That, I think whether you teach dance or work with children, whether they're your own or somebody else's, to help them develop abilities, or do some kind of body work or rehabilitation, that we realize that it's that what gets in the way of learning new things is the things that we've already learned. So in the approach to realizing our abilities and our inherent talents, there's an understanding of how our habits, both in terms of our behaviors and our perceptions, how our habits interfere with learning new things, and how successful learning in the past gets in the way of learning something new. Perhaps an example is good. So it could be, that someone would hurt themselves. Let's say you step on a piece of glass or a nail, and that changes how you move. And that kind of learning, I think these days we might refer to it as a traumatic experience, but that kind of learning is kind of, it's one-time learning. It changes how you move kind of instantly. And though you may go to the hospital and get the whatever damages, that the injury to your foot taken care of, have sutures or whatever you need, and take time to heal, and that would get better, something will have changed in the moment where you stepped on that piece of glass, so that you don't step on that part of your foot. And that will change how your legs and your pelvis, your trunk and your head, your eyes, and everything works together, so that you, many years later, are still not stepping on that part of your foot. These habits, whether you learn them over time through practice or you learn them instantaneously, are, I think, the thing from our perspective that is the greatest hindrance to learning anything new. So in the practice of the method, we have a way of learning that kind of sneaks under the tent or goes behind the ways that we've learned, and makes it possible to discover the things that we have missed, that we don't have access to, within our potential. I think perhaps it might be most interesting to have a chance to experience that. So would you be willing to get on the floor and do some movement? Before you do that, would you please stand up? And just let your arms hang comfortably. Stand however is easy. And take a moment to make an appraisal of where you are and how you sense yourself. what are you looking at? Are you looking at the wall or the window or whatever directly in front of you? Do you see the floor or the ceiling? Is your gaze more to one side or the other? Perhaps you're looking at the screen. Can you tell where your feet are without looking down? Can you sense where they are? That's your internal proprioceptive, self-sensing ability, your sense of where your feet are, like how far apart they are, where they may be pointing. You can look down and check and see, does what you see fit with what you sensed internally? Where are your arms hanging? Are your hands in front of your thighs, to the side of you, or behind you? Slowly, without it much oomph. So take your time and perhaps just investigating what the beginning of the action feels like. Would you turn and look to one side and come back? Doesn't matter which side. Just turn and look to the side and return. Do that a few times, easily. And then turn and look the other way. Notice when you turn, which side is easier? Stop for a moment. Was it easy to tell? Come back, turn the way you were just turning this to the second side. Notice, how far do your eyes see? Does your head move and the rest of you stay still? Do your shoulders move? Does your pelvis move? Do you feel the weight shift on your feet? And then look the other way. It doesn't matter how far you go. If your shoulder moves when you look to that side, does it go backwards or does it come towards your face as you turn in that direction? What can you tell? Good. Please come and lie down. If you want to aim the camera in your direction, that will help me as a teacher and see what's going on. And I can also provide some guidance if you wander. You can empty your pockets. You can take your glasses off. If you want to look at the screen, you can put them back on. But this is not going to be something where much is going to be happening if you're looking at me. Good. Just lie on your back. Please bend your knees if that's more comfortable for you. Leave your legs long if that's easy. You choose. Do the same thing with both legs. If you don't want to be seen, it's fine to shut the camera off. Take a few moments to notice how you're resting on the floor, where you're touching. So in the following experience, if you've never done one of these lessons, I'm going to describe some actions. I'll ask you to repeat them a number of times and pay attention to what you're doing. And often I'll give you some clues about what to pay attention to, ask you questions about what is easier or more difficult. And it's an opportunity to learn something about how you move. Before we do that, let's take a few moments where you notice how you're resting on the floor. So, for instance, how far are your hands from your trunk, from the rest of you? So if your hands are on you, if you're resting your hands like on your belly somewhere, then they're not far at all. But if they're not, if your hands are on the floor, are they right next to your legs or pelvis? Are your hands at shoulder height? And knowing where your hands are, that'll tell you something about where your arms are. And it'll begin to give you a sense of how you've arranged yourself on the floor. Like, how far apart are your legs? Are your feet right next to each other? Are your feet further apart than your pelvis is wide? If your knees are bent, your feet will touch the floor and no other part of your legs. If your legs are long, the backs of your calves will touch the floor as well. Perhaps the backs of your thighs. And then wherever your arms and your legs are, your trunk will be touching, so your pelvis touches. You feel your buttocks, the bottom of your spine, your sacrum between your buttocks. The other end of your spine, there's your head, and in between, what parts of your spine do you feel on the floor? You'll notice that probably your neck, most of your neck, if not all of it, doesn't, the vertebrae of your neck don't touch. For most folks, the bottom part of the spine between the chest and the pelvis doesn't touch. And then some of the vertebrae between your shoulders or below your shoulders, and some part of your spine where your ribs attached, that will touch, and the backs of your ribs perhaps will touch, and the backs of your shoulders. If you put all these places that touch together, you can get a sense overall of your contact, where there's the most pressure, where there's the least, where there's none, and kind of the shape you make on the floor. Would you please roll onto your left side? And put your right arm in front of you, so your right hand's on the floor. Bend your knees. And lift your right hand from the floor a few times. Do that easily and gently. So your right hand is in front of you. It's the palm of your hand's on the floor, but make your arms straight. So your right hand is somewhere in front of you. Your palm is on the floor, your elbow straight. Lift your hand. Do that gently and easily. Notice the weight of your arms. Like, well, you can let your fingers relax and get rid of any extra tension in your arm. That won't help you lift it. But just notice what's it like at the beginning? What happens with the rest of you? When you lift up your arm, do you breathe in, out? Do you hold your breath? And notice what's the easy range. So, I mean, for some people, that might be just beginning to lift your hand off the floor might be enough. But how far can you go easily? Good. Stop and roll on the other side, please. So you bend your knees. You lie on your right side. Put your left arm in front of you. And like not in front of your face or in front of your belly, but kind of your left arm in front of your right shoulder at that height, more or less. On the floor, your arm straight, and lift it a few times. How does it compare? What do you do with the rest of yourself? Good. Stop, roll on your back, and rest a moment. Could you tell which side was easier? Would you please roll so that you're lying with the easier on the in the whatever was the easiest orientation? If there were even, just pick one. And so I will do my best to avoid right and left. And I'll talk about the arm on the top. Right, the arm that's on the, let's say, the ceiling side. So you're going to bend both of your knees and put the top arm in front of you and just lift it again a couple of times. So you lift the hand from the floor and just do the beginning of the action. Notice stop for a moment, put your hand down so you put the full weight of your hand down. Notice what happens when you pick up your hand, like just the very moment that you start to take the weight of your hand, it doesn't disappear. You have to do the work somewhere else. Notice if your chest rolls a little forward or backward, if you create tension in your jaw or around your eyes, if you hold your breath, pull your belly in, I don't know, contract your toes. Where do you counterbalance for lifting up your arm? Please put your hand down. Leave your arm straight and slide your hand slightly forward on the floor. And by slightly, I mean not as far as you can. So slowly slide your hand forward and come back. By forward, I mean that it's not going toward your head or toward your knees. It's going directly towards the wall or whatever in front of you. And notice when you do that, what happens with the rest of you? Does your head roll? Do you feel the weight shift underneath your left arm or your chest on the left side on the floor? Oh, I'm sorry. See, I said left. So on the side that's on the floor, does the contact your head is making change? Do you roll towards your chin or toward the back of your head or toward your nose when your hand goes forward? Or does your head roll toward the back of your head? How about on the arm that's on the floor? Does your weight go forward as the top hand reaches forward? Or what happens on your rib cage? Does something change at your pelvis? Does the top knee slide over the bottom knee? Okay. If you're moving your head, make the movement of your arm so small that your head's not disturbed. If you're moving your knee, make the movement so small that you're not rolling your pelvis. Your pelvis stays still, your head stays still. And now, can you find a way for your hand to slide forward and your chest not rolling so that there's no movement of your chest on the floor? That would mean that your shoulder blade would slide away from your spine in the back. And then it would pull back as your hand comes back. So you bring your hand back to the beginning place. Right? Your elbow doesn't straighten, doesn't bend. I mean, it stays straight. So your shoulder has to move. Can you feel that? When your hand goes forward, your shoulder blade slides away from your spine, from your vertebrae in the back, kind of like a sliding closet door or sliding patio door. And then it comes back. Can you pull your shoulder blade back toward your spine? Almost as if to touch. So that will pull your hand back closer toward you. And just make the movement of your hand happen from your shoulder blade. So you keep your elbow straight and you let the movement of your shoulder girdle, your shoulder blade, and your collarbone around your chest drive the movement of your hand and your arm forward and back slowly, without holding your breath. Don't go far. Can you feel where you work? So to pull your hand back, you have to pull your shoulder in toward your spine. Something works in the back. To push your hand forward, you have to pull your shoulder girdle forward. Something happens in the front of your chest. Can you do that without interfering with your breathing? Right. Stop. Roll on your back. Rest a moment, please. So here, this lesson is connected directly to this idea of how we're built, how our structure is designed for moving, so that you start to get a sense here of a specific set of relationships between your arm and your shoulder. Would you come back to the same position and do the same movement that you were just doing with just a little less oomph? So you don't have to go far. Don't go as far as you can go. Don't go as far so you have to push. Can you connect the feeling of your hand going forward and back, sliding on the floor? You want to decrease the friction, so decrease the pressure there, and feel what happens with your shoulder. Good. And now, would you once again lift your hand from the floor and notice if that's any easier? What do you do with your shoulder blade when you lift your hand from the floor? Well, it could slide away from your spine like it did when your hand went forward. It could slide back toward your spine, or it could stay still. Let's start with that option. What would it be like to lift your hand from the floor without moving your shoulder blade? Right, so you have to do something to keep the shoulder girdle from moving, to kind of stabilize it. And you lift your arm. Can you feel where you lift to do that? And then what if your shoulder blade helped with the movement, so that you pull your shoulder blade toward your spine as you lift your hand? Not one then after the other. So your hand doesn't slide backward. It doesn't slide towards your chest. It lifts from the floor as your shoulder blade goes back, without any extra work in your hand or your arm. There you go. That's it. Good. And now just lift your hand easily, however you like, and notice, can you have a sense of what it's like to connect the movement of your arm and your shoulder? Stop or rest on the floor. notice if the movements that you've been doing have affected anything about how you're resting on the floor, the distribution of the pressure and the arrangement of your limbs, the way your trunk is resting, your head is resting. Please come back to the same position. Put your so the hand that was in front of you, the arm that's closer to the ceiling, put that hand on the back of your head, please. So the hand that was in front of you, the top hand, not the arm that you're resting on, the other arm, put that hand on the back of your head. Somewhere easy. And the fingers and the palm of the hand, not your wrist. So you can lay your forearm on the side of your head or the top of your head. So your elbow's pointing forward, right? So your hand stays on the back of your head and you bring your forearm to touch the side of your head. Your elbow is pointing forward. Right. And yeah, just find an easy way to do that. If it's really hard to do that, you could take a little pad or a pillow and put it between your forearm, even fold up a small towel, put it between your forearm and your head. You can move where your hand is. That's fine. Good. And now slowly take your elbow toward the ceiling and return. That's it. Take your elbow toward the ceiling and return. There is more than one way to do that. So if you keep your head still and you take that elbow and you move it toward the ceiling, you don't move your head, then you have to move at your wrist, right? Because your hand's touching your head. Something happens between your forearm and your hand. The angle of your elbow doesn't change, but something happens at your shoulder joint. You move your arm around your shoulder blade. Can you feel that? If you go slowly, if you just do the beginning, does your chest move? If you don't move your chest, if you don't roll, if your trunk stays still, just go slowly, then you feel you're doing something just like you did a moment ago. You're pulling your shoulder blade back towards your spine. And that's what's lifting your elbow. So that your shoulder blade is there to give something for your muscles to attach to and to act as a kind of counterbalance to your arm. Go slowly, especially on the way back down. So as you bring your arm to your forearm to rest on the side of your head, go slowly. Here, leave your forearm there and just barely lift it. Just barely take your elbow toward the ceiling. Just break contact and then drop your arm. So you barely lift it and then let it go. Does that give you a sense of where that happens? You have to engage. Where do you engage to pull your arm in? Can you feel what happens between your shoulder and spine and how you let it go suddenly? Good. Now, let your arm rest on the side of your head or, on the pillow or the towel or whatever you're holding there. And slowly turn your elbow toward the ceiling. But keep your head and your arms stuck together. So you don't have to lift your head up. It can rest on your other arm or on the floor, or you could put it on something if it doesn't have to dangle. But turn your nose and your elbow together in the direction of the ceiling and come back. So your elbow doesn't move independently of your nose. Your nose and your elbow move at exactly the same time. To do that, you have to roll your head, right? Can you feel what happens? Now, you're not moving at your wrist or at your shoulder joint, but now the contact that your chest is making, the contact that your chest is making with the floor is changing. If you go slowly, you can do this without moving your pelvis, without moving the top knee. It stays on the other knee, or if you have it somewhere else, it stays there. If you move your head and your arm together so that there's no movement at your wrist or your shoulder, then there's no movement in your neck. Something has to happen between your shoulder and your pelvis. The top knee doesn't move. There you go. Wonderful. Please stop. Put your hand in front of you where it was when we began. So the top arm is going to be straight in front. And now lift your hand toward the ceiling again, or lift it away from the floor, and see, has that gotten any easier? What do you do with your head? Now leave your hand in front of you. Imagine that there's a stick that goes from your nose to your thumb. And now slowly turn your head and your hand together toward the ceiling. Right? So there's a stick that's attached at your thumb, attached at your nose, that creates a kind of triangle. So your head and your hand, your thumb and your nose move together. There you go. Notice if your pelvis moves. Notice if your top knee is moving. So if one knee is resting on the other, notice if you can do this when you do this, if your top knee moves, and if that's necessary, can you do this without moving your pelvis? Your head rolls on the floor or on whatever it's resting, because you look at your hand. So your nose and your thumb are moving together. Okay, just to make it clear, come back to the beginning. Put your hand on the floor, and now don't move your head. Don't move your head, and lift your hand away from the floor, but follow your hand with your eyes. That's it. Stop for a moment. Can you do the same movement and take twice as long? So your head stays still. You lift your hand from the floor, your eyes track that, and you can lift your hand as far as is easy for you. Remember, notice what happens with your shoulder blade. Does your shoulder girdle move? Do you pull your shoulder blade back to counterbalance your hand? And then when you've gone as far as you could, right? So your eyes are following your hand. If you go any further, you lose track of your hand. When you get to that place, and you can't look any further, let your head turn and find out what happens with your chest and your head. So when your eyes have tracked your hand as far as they can go, then let your head follow. And notice now what happens with your chest and your spine. Notice if your hand can go further. Notice if your pelvis moves, if your top leg moves. Does it do that at the beginning or somewhere along the way or at the very end of the movement? But please stop. Roll on your back and rest a moment. How we move is a result of what we've learned over our lifetime and of the particular structure we've inherited and whatever we've put it through and whatever's happened to us over the course of our lifetime and how we've responded to that. But we only move as well as we've learned to move. And most of that learning is idiosyncratic and some of it is under duress. Most of it is learning how to move just well enough to be able to do the things we want to do, not necessarily in the most optimal way. And sometimes, like with the example of someone hurting their foot and that affecting how they move, creating a limp, and all the other changes that come along with that and how we hold and move ourselves. We benefit from finding in our sensation, not just in our movement, but in our ability to notice and understand from the inside out. What does it mean to move with our whole selves? Please come back to the same position. Now you'll notice if you've never done this before, we're doing pretty much all these actions so far with you lying on one side. That's because learning has something to do, right? Harnessing the way the nervous system learns, has something to do with noticing differences. So here differences get clearer if we kind of stick to one side for a while. Don't worry, we'll come before we're done and do something with the other side. Come back to this position where you're lying on the same side as you were. The top arm is straight in front of you, the palms on the floor, your knees are bent, one leg's on top of the other. And now slowly slide your top knee a wee bit forward. So one knee's on top of the other. If you can bend your legs so that your knee's more or less in front of your hip, kind of like you were sitting in a chair, right? That same kind of angle, so that your knee goes forward, just like your hand goes forward. Your foot, the top foot, stays where it is on the other foot or on the floor. It doesn't move. Your knee goes forward, which means your pelvis moves forward. Notice when you do that, does your hand move forward on the floor? Does your head roll? Does something happen underneath your armpit or near your armpit, at your chest near your armpit, or in the middle of your ribs on the floor, or at your waist? Make the movement so small with your knee and your pelvis that your hand doesn't move, your head doesn't turn. Something happens in between. So your knee goes forward a little bit, your pelvis rolls, your spine has to move, and you can feel that. Does that happen in the very bottom of your spine? Or in the middle of your rib cage? Yeah. Good. And now do the opposite movement. Pull the top knee behind the bottom knee without lifting it up, but not a sudden movement, gradual, not sudden, sustained, incremental, smooth. So to pull your knee back means your pelvis has to move. So you're rolling your pelvis on the floor, and you're finding out if you can move your knee and your pelvis without moving your hand. If your hand doesn't slide back or forward, your head doesn't move. Not because you're pressing the floor or gritting your teeth or whatever, but because the movement with your pelvis is small, and that requires that something happens between your armpit and your hips. Something happens in your ankle and your knee and the top in your hip joint at the top where your leg meets your pelvis. Can you feel that your pelvis is also turning around the bottom leg? So something happens in the hip joint on the floor. Can you move your knee forward and back slowly? Okay, stop. And now slide your hand forward again, like we did at the beginning. So the top arm is straight. Slide it forward and come back. And now slide the top hand forward, a straight arm, and your knee forward at the same time. And then bring the hand back and the knee back. Pull them back at the same time. Now, to make it happen at the same time, it really helps to think of your shoulder and your pelvis moving together. You move your shoulder and your pelvis together forward, that will drive the knee and the hand forward and pull them back, and vice versa. Right. Good. Stop, please. And now lift your hand from the floor and notice, is that any easier? Are you looking at your hand? If your head doesn't move, can you feel what happens if your head doesn't move? It'll make the movement more difficult and limit how far you can go. Isn't that so? Good. Please stop, roll on your back, and rest a moment. What do you notice? About the pressure behind you, about the places that press, about your configuration on the floor. Please roll on the other side. And lift this hand from the floor and just, what did you learn on the other side about how you can move and where you can move that helps you understand what you're doing on this side? Or perhaps it's changed just from what you did on the other side. I don't know. Now that you have some idea of, perhaps what's possible and how things move in relationship to each other, you might be able to notice something about how you move on this side that you didn't notice before. Isn't it? When you lift your hand, do you roll forward or back? Where are your eyes looking? Does your head move? What happens at your pelvis? Let's stop, please. And would you put the top arm straight in front of you, your hand in front of you on the floor, in front of your shoulder? You can move the other arm out of the way if it's in the way. Rest your head on your other arm, straight or bent, if you like, or put something there to support your head. And slide your hand forward and return. When you slide your hand forward, what does the rest of you do? Does your head roll? Does your knee move forward and back? Which means, does your pelvis move? What happens with your chest, your ribs on the floor? And slowly begin to do such a small movement that your head doesn't roll. So you don't have to stiffen your neck or anything. You just make the movement of your hand forward and the return so easy that it doesn't disturb your head or engage your head. Same thing with your pelvis, so that your knee doesn't move forward or back or lift and lower, whatever. And then can you find a way to do this without rolling your chest? So you find your shoulder girdle. You move your shoulder blade and your arm together. That's it. And then you slide your hand back and pull your shoulder blade in toward your spine. Can you find what you found on the other side? Is it easier to have this clear sense of how your arm connects to your trunk through your shoulder girdle? When your shoulder blade moves like this, something happens in the front of your chest. Can you feel that? Good. Leave that alone. And now, can you find the movement of your knee going forward and back on this side? Go slowly. Slide your knee just a bit forward. Leave the top foot on the bottom foot or on the floor, wherever it is. Is it possible to do this without your hand sliding forward or back? What do you do with your breath? So if you hold your breath, try that. Hold your breath and move your knee forward or back. Does that make the movement easier? Does it make it more likely that your hand moves forward when your knee moves forward? Now, do this really quickly. Can you move your knee a little forward and a little back? You barely have to move, but forward and back, almost like you're jiggling, like Jello shaking, Jello pudding shaking. So just a quivering movement forward and back really quickly and lightly, so that your shoulder doesn't move and your hand doesn't move. What happens with your breathing? Good. Please stop. And now lift your hand and bring it and find out, is that easier? Are you following the movement of your hand with your eyes, with your head? Find out how far can you lift your arm without moving your head. And then when you get to that place, if you turn your head a little more, perhaps your arm will move further. Right? Can you feel what happens if you turn your head at that point? Good, stop. Rest a moment just on your side there. Put your hand back in front of you. Come back to that same position. Go as far as you can go easily. Stop at that point. So without forcing. So you're not, there's no strain. Just as the point where you have to work to go any further. Just stay there. And now staying there, take your knee forward and back. Slowly. Can you move your knee forward and back? That is, move your pelvis and not move your hand or your head. So this is kind of an interesting and delicate operation. Your knee's not coming up towards your head and moving down away from it. Your thighs stay more or less parallel, and you slide your knee forward. And that rolls your pelvis a bit forward. And you slide your knee back, which is kind of bringing your pelvis in the direction of rolling onto your pelvis. There you go. Can you do that without moving your arm? I mean, once you could find it, if you could find it, you could do it very quickly and lightly, like almost like a tremor. Oh, that's fine. Stop. Put your arm down, please. And just a few times, lift your hand and your arm and notice if that has changed. Where are you moving that you weren't moving? The point is, could you find something easier? If you find something that's truly easy, then you're more likely to look for it. Well, actually, not to have to look for it, but to find it later. To take it with you, please roll on your back and rest. How has your contact changed? Is the way that you're arranged on the floor, the configuration of your limbs, the shape that you make, the arrangement, the pressure behind you, has that changed since we started? Would you please roll to your side and come up to sitting? And when you're ready, come up to standing. Thank you for leaving your cameras on. And Sandy, say hi to your dog for me. All right. And please notice how you're standing. Where are your feet on the floor? How are your arms hanging? Where are your hands? Where are you looking? Turn your head to one side a few times. Has that changed? How did what you sense, what you did on the floor affect what you do now? Just look to that side a couple of times. You never know what you missed the first time until you come back. Give yourself another chance. And then compare that with the other side. I wonder what you learned about your potential for movement and how you'll take that with you. All right, I think I've been talking for a while, so I'll stop. If you have any questions or comments, we have a few moments left. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being on the floor. Thanks to those of you who had your cameras on. I think you can just unmute yourself. I believe that's possible. So
I see a lot of familiar faces and names, but I'm also, I wonder if everybody has done a Feldenkrais lesson before, or if for anybody, it was the first time they experienced a lesson.
It's not the first time I experienced the lesson, but it was a very pleasant lesson, especially at the end of the day. And I want to thank you, Larry, very much for this very nice lesson. And Caro, I'm just happy to say hello to you.
Same here, Anne. Very nice to see you. Pardon?
After so many years.
Yeah, yeah.
So everyone's done a Feldenkrais lesson before? Wow.
No, not Feldenkrais.
Ah, okay. Thank you, Judith.
No, but I follow a class. It's called Natuurlijk Pilates, Natural Pilates. And I recognize a lot of exercises actually that we've done today. We try to be very selective in our and conscious about the movements we learn in that lesson as well. So yeah, I recognize the principle. of movement.
Cool.
That.
Well, I mean, you know, it is one body. One would hope that the principles are rather universal, right? You know, if somebody tells you it's totally different, you got to wonder.
True.
May I say something to the question of the potential of my movement?
Please, Cornelia.
I'm Cornelia from Germany, and I'm myself a Feldenkrais practitioner, but I took the opportunity, and I thank you all that I could listen to you once again, because I like very much your style of teaching, which brings me to a mixture of deep meditation and high consciousness at the same time. And
Wow,
this,
thank you.
yeah, and this happens when I can listen to one NOI a day or opportunities like this. And I thank you very much for this. And I feel much more potential to move in any direction after this lesson. And this is a wonderful feeling. And I'm very deep in my middle, in my center. Yeah, that's the result of experiencing my first person perspective. Thank you very much, Larry. And thank you very much for to the organizers of this event. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We'll be, Caro and I will be doing an event together the 12th of September. Is that right, Caro? Which is about the new training program that we'll be starting next year. And then in October, I'll be doing a 3-day workshop about moving from the center, Cornelia, since you mentioned it. That was a perfect segue. Thank you. I'll send you your €5 later. That was really perfect.
And that's live.
And that's live and in person. Well, they're all live. That one is
that's true.
En présence, comme on dit en français. So in presence.
And perhaps if the new training starts in Amsterdam, you can take or receive visitors, so I can visit the training in 2 years or so.
Yeah, I think we will welcome visitors, and it will be in southern Holland, in Ryan, sort of. Yeah, so it'll be in a different place.
I'm coming from the Rhineland originally. I live near to Kiel now in the northern part of Germany, but I'm from the Rhineland, so I know a lot of the Netherlands. Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
So may I ask you which kind of events you plan for was it September or October? I can't remember already.
September is a webinar that Cara and I are doing, introducing the new program, and October is a live 3-day workshop at the training venue.
Okay. You will announce this through your newsletter, I think.
We will, and if you've signed up for this, you'll also get information about it. We're just putting the finishing touches on the on all of it, and yeah. But the plan is to start at the end of April of 2024.
Nice.
Sounds like science fiction, 2024. Anyway.
Maybe you want to talk more about this training, this particular training, Larry or Carol?
Well, I wanted to say something to Judith, who talked about Pilates. There's a Pilates instructor here in the States, somebody who worked with Joseph, she wrote a book called The Red Thread. And those of you who know me will understand. She was a graduate of the Feldenkrais training I ran in Manhattan. But I think it's called The Integrated System and Variations of Pilates. Her name is Catherine Ross Nash. So there are some similarities there, I think, especially in her approach. So you might be interested in checking that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Definitely interested in the Feldenkrais method as well, because I think it seems like a valuable asset to getting people into movement, into healthy movement again. And
Yeah.
I already a lot of people I work with, so yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, I already picture a lot of people I work with to try to get them into Feldenkrais exercise, actually.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think, look, Feldenkrais is about, it's about learning. So whatever it is that you're teaching, I think it's a great way of understanding how people learn. And as a Feldenkrais, I became a Feldenkrais teacher because I like having a job where you're trying to get rid of the necessity for you to work with other people. My so many physical approaches. I don't know. I like being an educator. I like that. I'm helping somebody understand the potential that they were born with, what's built into their system, that they have this capacity, and I love what happens when people are learning, because I think they feel their capacity in a really positive way. I mean, what better way to feel good about yourself than to connect to your ability to learn? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Carl, should we take Anne up on her invitation to talk more about the training? Thank you, Nicolene. But I mean, I'd rather answer people's questions. So I didn't see any questions in the chat. Let me look and see if oh, thank you, Cornelia, for putting the information in. Well, okay, I'll say a few things about the training. It's a PC training, meaning it's a post-COVID training. So the training is going to combine 3 2-week segments with did we decide 3 or 4? Well, different length of online teaching segments, so that in the times between when we're together, we'll be able to keep working, which is like has been my dream forever. And I'm sorry that it took a worldwide pandemic to create a situation where other people would think that this is a reasonable thing to do. But I am so glad that that is one of the outcomes. So I know it's a terrible way to get here, but I am glad to be here because I think it's really good for everyone's learning. Carl and I have been doing, this will be our 6th training working together. And we have, we'll be having other trainers there and assistant trainers. And all of our training programs, we have tutor teacher positions. So for people who are Feldenkrais teachers who have 5 or more years of experience and who are willing to give either Carol or I a lesson, because that's a test you have to pass, can come and give lessons to students in exchange for being there, and kind of act as support faculty for the program. And I don't know, Carol, why don't you say something? That's what comes to my mind. I'm sure you have something
Okay.
to add.
Sure. I just maybe to give some idea about some more clarity about the schedule, that the way we have the 3 segments per year of 2 weeks, and then what it comes down to is that almost every month there will be 1 weekend online, and that will have different shapes. It could be Friday afternoon, it could be 4 afternoons or something like that, or it could be 1 afternoon, 1 whole day, and another afternoon. So, but 1 weekend a month online will be the format, so to speak. So that will give some idea maybe of how for people how to organize that also. And that will be clearer as we go, and we hope that Jorik can, when we have everything together, that he can put all the information on the website soon and have some more information about that ready.
Yeah, I think we'll have that. I mean, it may take another month or so, but we'll have that, the schedule, and the training will, the training will finish with a certificate, which is recognized by so the training will be accredited through the European Feldenkrais Training Accreditation Board, which means we have to meet all of the criteria for being a good Feldenkrais training. And so that's an internationally recognized teaching certificate. So you can join the professional organization in any other country. And we also will be certified by ESMETA, by the International Somatic Movement Education and Therapy Association. So the graduates will also get a certificate from that. So you'll get both of those when you graduate.
And maybe something, I don't know, that may not be news, but at pretty much the halfway point of the training, you'll get a certificate for to be an ATM teacher and to start teaching awareness through movement, which is the group lessons. You can start teaching those and get paid for those, so that you can learn and experience, and then still be in the training and find out more and come back with your with your questions. So that's, for some people, that's a nice thing to know, that halfway the training you can start teaching already to groups, and that's connected to finishing the training, which, after the end of the training, then you're certified and you can give one-to-one lessons as well as group lessons. So that's another thing. I know for some people, for many people, that may not be news, but
okay, Boris. Training it's 4 years. It happens over 3.5 calendar years. And the requirements to participate are, well, we ask that you have some experience with the Feldenkrais method, because we think it's a good idea that you know what it's like. And the application asks for your educational background, your professional background, why you want to be in the training. We ask for 2 letters of recommendation, one from a Feldenkrais teacher, and that's not an 2 is a requirement. One of them doesn't have to be from a Feldenkrais teacher, but that's our preferred, so that we know that you've had some experience, and they know you and think that you would be a good teacher. I think that's it, right, Carl? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. But I think everybody here understood the lesson. That's the amount of English you need to know, pretty much. Because there will be always people who can help you translate, or who can, when you try to express yourself, who can help with that. Usually, for our, us Dutch people, we learn during the training, our English gets better as well. So that's like a bonus. So. Okay, so but requirement wise, yeah, it's that's there. Yeah. So I think a lot of people, including myself, got very nicely into the lesson, and got very quiet and nice. So I don't know, time wise, how are we doing?
I think it's time. I think it's time to stop.
I think so too.
Does anybody want to have the last word or last question or whatever? Since you're still here.
I think, I don't know if Jorik is still here, but I think he's sending, if you want the recording, you can ask him for it. And I think he will also, because you registered, he will have you on the list and keep you posted about developments of the training. So, and if you have more questions along the way, you can ask Jorik, or you can mail
Bernd asked a question, which I should answer. So we're just talking about one particular training program, which will be happening in the southern part of the Netherlands. You asked about trainings in Spain and Sweden, I think, or Norway.
Sweden.
What did you?
Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden. Yeah. And there are trainings there. That's the Instituto Feldenkrais. That's Patricia Simon. Anne is actually going to be directing a training in Paris. So it's possible to take trainings in other places as well. And you can find out about those online like you can find out about anything else. But it's not possible to take this program in those places, because this program is happening in one place, but there are other trainings all over the world.
Yeah. Yes, so I want to thank everybody for coming and being involved, and please spread the word, or for yourself, find out more if it's something for you to do. And we have the other events, more may come up.
If you have questions about the program, please you can write to Pantaray, to York, and he can pass it on to me. I'm glad to answer. So is Carl. We're glad to answer your questions about the training program, about Feldenkrais training in general, and about whether this is the right training for you. I think when I did the training, there wasn't a choice of trainings. You wanted to do a training, you went and studied with Moshe where he was. Now there are lots of choices of trainings. I think people, you know, propinquity, that's a great word, propinquity, geographical closeness is often a criteria that people use for trainings, and it makes a lot of sense. I also think finding the right teacher for you is important. And, in our next installment, Carl and I will be talking about this training and how we teach and our approach to it. And, if you're thinking about the training, I encourage you to sign up and come and hear about that, because people teach in different ways, and we're not everybody's teachers, and we don't try to be. So, yeah, we hope to see you there.